A warm welcome to Disky Talk with Luyolo. If you're tuning in for the very first time, I do ask that you please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've been a part of this journey, I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. So, on today's episode, we discuss all things Big Three as we discuss Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates and Mamelodi Sundowns. On today's episode, the focus is on our big three within South Africa. So I'm going to do a thoroughbred tactical diagnosis of the three teams, what is working and what is not working. But we will then start with Kaizer Chiefs. So with regards to Kaizer Chiefs then, they've played 6 games. They've won 1 game and they've drawn 3 games and they've lost 2 games. So it hasn't been a good start to life in the Dstv Premiership, and they also sit at number 12. So this is very disappointing then, considering how they were able to sign a couple of good players during the transfer window, and also considering the fact that they also had a chance to sign some quality free agents within this past transfer window, but they didn't act on that. So very disappointing then, because when you have a look at how Kaizer Chiefs fared out last season within the Dstv Premiership, they just made top 8. So going into this season, you would have thought that Kaizer Chiefs would look to start off strongly, you know, but they find themselves at number 12. There's a very negative cloud which hangs over the club currently, and a lot of people are disgruntled, you know, and things aren't going well from a Kaizer Chiefs perspective. However, when we then have a look at it from a tactical perspective, so you've got Stuart Baxter, who's come in and he's instituted very different formations, you know. So he's tried the 4-2-3-1, he's tried the 3-4-3, and he's also tried a 4-3-3, you know. And but the lineup that he's most gone with, it has been the 4-2-3-1. And yeah, I mean, against Baroka, that's the one game that they have won, you know, where he did go with a 4-2-3-1. For about 50 to 60 minutes of that game, it looked really good from a Kaizer Chiefs perspective, you know, and also from a formational perspective. But with the 3-4-3, it hasn't looked as fluid. They've struggled. And even with the 4-3-3, you know, at times they did struggle. But I think it boils down to many reasons. And it's a confluence of A, the coach himself, B, the personnel, and then C, the understanding of the system that he's trying to institute with the personnel. So when you have a look at it then, there's no problem with playing the false 9 that he's had to go with, because now Nukovic is out. But even then, when Nukovic was there, he was still playing Billiat as the false 9, which I found as a major issue, because Nukovic is a lot more suited playing as the target man and playing as the number 9, especially when you consider his style of play, his body orientation, and his technical ability and his skill set as well. You know, he's well versed at being a box striker. That's what he's actually good at. He's better doing that than actually starting off the left-hand side in vertical zone 1, where he'd play as a split striker, as they would term it. You know, I think he's better as the main striker as opposed to being the split striker, you know. So no problem then with playing a false 9. It's just a false 9 is not an isolated position. However, it's a whole system. And when you have a look at it as a whole system, the whole team has to be well informed with regards to that system. So if we have a look at it and we have an illustration, you know, so if we find ourselves within this phase of play and the false 9, who would normally occupy zone 14 and occupy the 2 center halves. So let's bring in the 2 center halves in there and occupy the 2 center halves. If he vacates, maybe drops off into that pocket of space, which is vertical zone 2, which is the left half space. What would then need to happen is that one of the other players then would then have to be smart enough then to read the game and actually go and occupy zone 14 whenever he does come out. But with Chiefs, many a times, whenever that false 9 does come out, there is no one in there. So then it then makes it difficult whenever the ball goes wide and then you have one of the fullbacks, either Frosla or Shanti out wide, then there is no reference point then to cross to. And even then, the false 9 that they have been playing doesn't really work, because when you look at Parker, you look at Billiard, and you look at Ngobo, who they tried against Marumo Gallants, you know, they aren't the tallest and they're not very good in the air. So even then, when you do have them and the ball goes wide, you know, even if you're crossing it, but, you know, you're clutching at straws because they're coming up against most likely two very physical center halves who are good in the air and who will compete for that ball and win it. So it then, you know, what happens then is that the ball would go wide, limited, you can't really cross. They recycle back into the midfield. When they recycle back into the midfield, they lack a number 10 with that penetrative, creative style of play to then obviously look to penetrate and break them down. So then what oftentimes would happen is the ball would be played out wide, they'd play the cross, which sometimes would be a poor delivery, it goes out, it kills that phase of play, or it goes wide and then it comes back into midfield and then nothing really progresses from there, you know. But I would say the joy that they have found at periods, you know, was on the right-hand side, you know, especially with Dolly, whenever he'd come into that half space and Blom would go. That's where there seems to be a bit of fluidity and a bit of creativity from that perspective. Whenever that would happen, you know, that's when it looks positive. But otherwise, yeah, man, it's looked really, really dull from this Kaizer Chiefs side. And yeah, so going forward then, it's going to be very interesting to see what Stuart Baxter does. But, you know, when I have a look at this Kaizer Chiefs side, you know, I think going forward, the best thing, you know, I just believe is that he should stop accommodating, firstly, and play the best players in the best positions. And yeah, very difficult because, you know, the best players in his view are some of the players who have been doing very badly. But I think then going into the league after this international break, I think just freshening things up, and this 2-week break will help him work on a couple of things, you know. So I think then going into the DStv Premiership, I just think he has to change things. And yeah, man, you know, we need to see Nkosi Mpile Ngobo being played in his favorite position at number 10. We need to see Sabelo Khatebe being introduced. You know, we need to see Dube and Roadblock actually instituting as a pair in the heart of defense, you know, and also in the goalkeeping department. I think he needs to get to a point where he decides who is his number 1, you know, because all 4 options have played, you know, and I don't think that is healthy, especially when you're trying to build on momentum and consistency, because the chopping and changing, you know, is also not good. You know, at some time he needs to settle and pick who's going to be the number 1, who's going to be the back 4, who's going to be the midfield options, and also going up front, and also coming up then with the solution for the number 9 role and the forward line, because yeah, it's clear that Kaizer Chiefs are lacking a number 9 and a focal point and a reference point. However, at home, do let me know that what would you do if you're Stuart Baxter going into the DStv Premiership after this 2-week break? What are the things that you'd tweak and what are the things that you would work on? So let's move on right along then to Orlando Pirates. So with regards to Orlando Pirates then, yeah, Orlando Pirates do find themselves at 6th. So they've played 2 games, they've drawn 3 and they've lost 1. So yeah, which is not a bad return. However, when you have a look at the stature of the club and you have a look at the types of players they have from a qualitative perspective, they would have wanted to be a lot further up the table. However, when we have a look at Orlando Pirates then, you know, I think they're starting to find their rhythm and consistency with regards to their lineup and their methodology and how they want to do things going forward. So when you have a look at Orlando Pirates then, you know, they've been very consistent with a 4-2-3-1. And that would sometimes transition into a 4-3-3. And I think Pochane has, I think he's been very good in goals. And I think he should be the number 1 going forward. And when you have a look at their back 4, it's mostly been Bandile Shandu at right back, 2 centre halves of Tlachayo and Jele, and then Paseka Mako. I think this back four is really growing. We did see Nda make his debut against Cape Town City. I think he had a decent display. Going forward, I think he can grow on that display and actually become a very, very important player for Orlando Pirates if given a chance and if he's actually able to grow within this side. But going forward, what I would do then with this back four is I would look to have Abel Mabaso at right back and then have two centre halves, Hlatwayo and Jele. I think they look a bit more solid, whenever they do have this centre-back pairing, and then have Paseka Mako as the left-back. So when you then have this back four, it's a very, very tactically disciplined back four and very organized from a defensive perspective, which I think is very important. And the reason why I'd have this back four is because, with Bandile Shandu, he tends to bomb forward, a lot of the times. So then he does leave that gap open, and from that side, then it becomes very easy to attack this Orlando Pirates side. However, if you have Abel Mabaso there, who I think that's his best position at right back, I think then you'd have a lot more defensive shape. And what would then be very nice from an Orlando Pirates perspective is how they build up, because then you've got a Jele, you've got a Marco, you've got a Mabaso who are very comfortable in building up phase and building up the ball. And the nice thing then is that it would allow your wingers in Pule and Hoto, to stay really high and wide, because then you've got two fullbacks who won't always bomb forward. So they could always then, whenever Orlando Pirates find themselves in this phase of play, where they've progressed the ball into the opposition half, so they could always just, keep their shape and keep their position and invert at times, which then gives them that defensive base and that defensive stability. Because if anything happens when play breaks down, they do have the 5 players. They've got that defensive block of 2 and 3 that they would have in the 2 fullbacks, being Marco as the left back, Abel Mabaso as the right back, and then Musele in there, and then the 2 centre halves. And what I like about this then is that it would enable Pule and Hoto to focus mainly on offensive duties. Because in the last game, you did see that Pule had to drop back and help out defensively. But when you have this defensive solidity and you have this defensive shape, I think that it would really, really assist this Orlando Pirates side. And then in the heart of midfield, go with the deep playing with the deep laying playmaker of Nkanyiso Zungu, and then have Makubela as your number 8/number 10, and then have Mabasa up front. So I think currently this would be their best 11, and I think they would be better suited at playing like this. And even when they build up play, whatever happens, whenever they do lose the ball, they have got enough numbers behind the ball. So I think Orlando Pirates will keep growing. I just think there's just one thing that has to happen at the club. I think they have to appoint a head coach and not necessarily go outside, but appoint Mandla Ngazi as the head coach and give him a chance, because I think that when they're not sure and they just left as assistant caretaker coaches, it does bring a bit of instability and a bit of doubt, and you don't want that, because I think this Pirates side, I've seen glimpses and I've seen a few positive signs that they are on to something. So moving on then right along to Mamelodi Sundowns. So when we have a look at Mamelodi Sundowns then, Mamelodi Sundowns are playing really beautiful football. They're doing really well within the Dstv Premiership, and they do find themselves in the MTN 8 final as well. They've been absolutely phenomenal, and they do find themselves at number 1. They've played 6 matches. They've won 5 and they've drawn 1, so no loss as of yet. And within the Dstv Premiership, they've kept 6 clean sheets. So they haven't conceded a goal, but they've scored 11 goals in 6 games, which is very, very impressive. You're looking at a rate of just under 2 goals per game. So the beautiful thing then about this Mamelodi Sundowns side is that they institute a hybrid system, which is a 4-3-3, which would then transition into a 3-4-3 whenever the 2 wing-backs do go up. The 2 wing-backs would go up. The 2 centre-halves, which have been consistent, have been Deruk have been Kekan as the right-sided centre-half and Deruk as the left-sided centre-half. They would open up, and then you'd have Rivaldo Kutsia come in there. And what then this would do is that it would enable Sundowns to overload within the opposition half, which would then see them institute their numerical advantage, especially in vertical zone 3 within the central zone. So in here, they would normally institute a 4 versus 3 or 4 versus 2. And then whenever the opposition team would add a body in there, Rivaldo Kutsia can always come in and make it a 5 versus 4 or 5 versus 3. And this is how they keep ball possession within the opposition half. They do this very, very well. And when you have a look at Mamelodi Sundowns, they're well-conditioned, well-trained. I think within the league and within the country, they're the best-trained football team. They're the best-conditioned football team. And from a tactical and technical perspective, they tick all the boxes. You know, and qualitatively, they're just an amazing football club. You know, the structure that they've instituted and the style has been absolutely phenomenal to watch. And what I like about them is how aggressive they can become in the opposition half. So at times, it ends up looking like a 3-6-1, which is very beautiful to see. And when you have a look at the key players, then, you know, Onyango has been key in goals, has kept so many clean sheets. Deruk, for me, has been absolutely paramount, you know, in the absence of both Lebusa and Nascimento. You know, his leadership at the back has been very pivotal for the Sundown side, which has earned him multiple call-ups into the national team. He's growing in the national team. He's also become a very pivotal part of that national team. And how he institutes build-up play, how he starts with the ball at his feet, ambidextrous player. He can pick a pass with his right foot, with his left foot, very comfortable on the ball. And what I love about him is that he's sort of this sort of a hybrid defender. So he's very old school in a sense when it comes to defending. In the box, no nonsense. He clears it, he clears his lines, and he's very secure, and he gives that Mamelodi Sundowns side assurance. Also very good in the air. But now the modern day side and the technical and tactical aspect when it comes to him is that he often at times, you know, he builds up play for this Mamelodi Sundowns side. So they've got a deep playing playmaker in Rivaldo Kutsia. But Rushin Deruk can also assume that responsibility with his range of passing, you know. So in build-up phase, yeah, man, he gives Mamelodi Sundowns so much. And then Rivaldo Kutsia as the deep laying playmaker, also another key player who's been doing really, really well, who forms part and parcel of the spine. And then you've got Jali as well, who's been able to cover for Rivaldo Kutsia and also play with Rivaldo Kutsia in the heart of midfield whenever they would go with Rivaldo Kutsia and Jali. You've got Lila K, who's been doing very well in this left wing back position. So he's kept 6 clean sheets and he's got 4 assists, which is very impressive and very phenomenal from a numbers perspective. And then you've got Peter Shalulile, who's on 5 goals, who's currently tied with Litswalo for the Golden Boot race within the Dstv Premiership. 5 goals in 6 games, very impressive. And then last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, the most elite, most exciting player to watch within the Dstv Premiership, within South Africa, and within Africa, one of the most exciting players and one of the best players within Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Themba Mshishi Zwane, quality footballer. If you haven't watched him, guys, just put aside 90 minutes in jail. That's all I'm asking for. 90 minutes. Just go watch Themba Zwane. Magnifique. So that is Mamelodi Sundowns and how they've been dominating. That's how they've been doing very well. And they create so many clear-cut chances within the final third, and they've been scoring them as well. So when we wrap it up then in the extra time segment with regards to these 3 teams, yeah, so I think Kaizer Chiefs will have a very long season ahead. I think they'll struggle this season. And yeah, you know, if I have to give you a position where they'll finish, you know, I think they'll finish 8th. You know, I think they'll finish within top 8, but they won't have a good season if they continue within this vein and changes aren't instituted at the club. With regards to Orlando Pirates, I think that they should be on course for a top 3 finish. You know, I think they'll grow because I can see how tactically organized that they are and how defensively sound they're also growing to become, you know. So they're shutting up shop at the back and they're becoming very solid, and they're able to deal with the pressure. Up front, Mabasa's getting the goals. Pule has been such a pivotal player for this Orlando Pirates side. You know, he's got 4 assists to his name within 6 games. So he's assuming playmaking responsibilities, and he's doing really, really well. And then Mamelodi Sundowns, wow. You know, they're doing really, really well. And what I love about Mamelodi Sundowns, just as a parting shot, they've created such a fluid, free-flowing system which isn't reliant and dependent on an individual, but on the whole footballing squad. With Mamelodi Sundowns, they don't train the 11 to 15 key players, but they train the whole squad and have created a well-balanced, well-refined, and tactically and technically advanced footballing system, which will see them win the DStv Premiership for the 5th time in a row. Ladies and gentlemen, do let me know, how do you feel about this episode with regard to the 3 big teams? Which changes have to be instituted at the clubs? What's gone right for them and what hasn't worked? Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another special episode of Diski Talk with Luyolo. Signing out.